Hey guys, welcome to HowTo in a Few. Today we're going to take a look at how to change out the strut assembly. If you don't know what a strut is, it's kind of like a shock absorber, but for the front of cars. It's usually a very fairly complicated job. It involves compressing springs, at least the last time I did it, which was when I was a teenager. So kind of an elaborate process of jacking the car up, taking the wheel off, getting the whole suspension down, and then using something called a spring compressor to compress the spring, remove a top cap, and get to the inside where the little shock absorber thing is. It's a strut cartridge, and then replacing that. But, well, a little more of the history. So then they started moving away from just the cartridge, and the whole bottom strut assembly that holds the spring came as one piece. And now apparently they've gone one further, and you can purchase the entire assembly, which I'll show you here. So not just the strut assembly with the bottom bracket for the spring, but the spring is already pre-compressed. Then there is the strut mount on the top, already assembled and ready to go. There's kind of a warning tag here because this is under pressure, and if it was to come loose, it'd probably take your whole head off. But it is taking a complicated job down to two relatively large bolts attachment here. Probably there's going to be something mounting on to this, probably part of the spindle, or maybe brake lines or something may get attached to this in a holder. We'll see when we get down there. And then three studs on the top, which will bolt through the fender well. All right. All right, so let's take a look at the question as to how do I know if my struts are bad. Struts will go bad. They act as a dampener, so they slow down the up and down motion of the car. It goes up and down, so when they start to go bad, you'll notice that the car will bounce more. Instead of kind of hitting a bump and staying stable, it'll hit a bump and it'll keep on swaying, and you feel like you're on some kind of amusement park ride. The other way you can tell, which is how I first noticed it on this side, was it loosens up inside, and you'll get a stutter. So that every time the car, that wheel, that side hits a bump, the whole wheel will kind of do a motion like this, which you can't see when you're driving, but you might be able to hear a clunk, 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 and it's a weird, loose kind of sound that can be very unnerving because you don't want your wheel or any kind of suspension part being loose. So that's going on this side, and it's now degraded because we've driven it a while. It's degraded to the point now when you hit the slightest bump, you feel like there's no shocks at all. You feel like you're just smacking every little bump. Instead of absorbing that shock, it's transferring that shock through the car, and you feel it as you drive. Not really a safe condition, because part of keeping that wheel, keeping the tire firmly traction to the ground, is making sure that it's on the ground and not bouncing up like a basketball once it hits something. So we're going to replace both of those. I'm going to take a look real quick and show you what we have ahead of us. Alright, so on this Traverse, it's kind of hard to see, but under this grill there's a circular area. We see a center nut that's on our strut mount, but those three studs that I was mentioning, the nuts are in there, so we have to figure out how to remove that plastic cover. Alright, before we went to the store, I went ahead and took some of this apart already. There were some body trim clips that ran across the bottom. This looks like it's the water line, hopefully you can see that, that runs to the back. I also pulled some caps off of the windshield wipers because they're gonna have to be removed. So two nuts there, body clips, and then way on this side there's the ground hookup, which I'm hoping simply unscrews out of the way of the wrench. That should clear up most everything. Yeah, well, we'll see once we get it loose. I don't want to cause any damage. I just pulled up the rubber seal on that side. We'll get the other side up. I think it's time to take those windshield wipers off. Alright, they look like they're 5/8, but they're probably like 15 millimeter or something. Now sometimes these are spring loaded, so be careful. A little bit weary of using a crowbar to get this up around glass, so I'm going to be careful. And this is scary stuff, but alright, so I'm just going to warn you. Don't do that if you're uncomfortable with the idea of putting a hammer that close to the window. In order not to lose these nuts, I'm going to go ahead and replace them. I'm going to move these out of the way. Alright, this ground screw looks like 9/16, 15 millimeter. My hope is this is just ground to the chassis, and it is. So, not much to worry about there. I am going to go ahead and screw this back on so it doesn't get lost. So hopefully we get lucky and this just lifts out. Slightly pull forward and then lift. So now I'm going to give you another look at that strut mount assembly in here. So there's a nut, there's the second, and then there's the third. And the other side should be similar. Actually, this side much easier to get to, lacking the wiper motor in the way. Alright, so here we are. We got the car jacked up, jack stands in place, and even put a wrench on it to try to get the size. You can see there are two of these rather large nuts and bolts. There is a torsion type bar hooked here, and we have the what looks like anti-lock brakes in there and here. Alright, one thing we're going to want to watch when we take this apart is that the entire assembly doesn't fall. I think we'll take our torsion bar out first, loosen these up. Alright, since I know I can get those loose, I'm going to go ahead and start up here. As soon as I get the right socket. So the irony there is that was the ratchet I bought. This one right here is one that I found on the ground in an intersection one day. Alright, they're all loose. I did put the third one back on, just temporarily until I get some stuff loose here. Down at the bottom. I'd love it if this was the same size. I'm not going to get that, am I? Come on. Oh, got lucky. See if we get lucky again. Guess what? We're not going to get lucky. Alright, so I'm using an 8mm wrench here to hold the stud in place while I loosen this nut. I think we got it now. One more shot. Oh my gosh. Alright, let's hit these. Nothing happening there. Alright, so I got a little help from my son. There's some Loctite on here. It was quite the job to get those nuts off. Now this isn't loose yet. I feel like it should be loose. Alright, they are loosening up now. Oh! Wow, they're actually studded in. So most likely, yep, they will have to be beat out. And hopefully you can see there the ridges. But we are very close now. Remember, I left that one nut up top. There we go. First one's out. Woo. So they tried to make like this was going to be easy peasy, but it's still quite a bit of work. Alright, we're starting to get some rain clouds moving in. Not sure we're going to finish this job today, but before we actually install the new assembled strut assembly, I wanted to show it to you real quick. For all the convenience that we gained, I'm not real happy with the fact that we're getting a much smaller. Now granted, it doesn't look like it's much smaller if you just look at it, but the difference between these two coil springs is huge as far as ride. So I already know this spring is not the same as the original, and it is going to produce a different ride. So we'll see what happens. Probably won't notice it initially because there's probably a charge in that strut that's going to compensate a little bit, but over time I would say it's probably going to wear out a lot faster. But got that lifetime warranty from AutoZone though. I'm not quite sure about my game plan here. I think I want to try to get it onto these, stick one of the bolts through, line it up, and then with my other hand feed it in and maybe get one of those nuts started. Okay, we're just going to call this a two-man job. Maybe the other screws. Alright, come down here. We're going to get some plastic. That's it. Alright, at least we're recording. Alright, so just a recap of that. Put these two on, tighten them up with the impact. They're going to need a little more hand tightening. I reattached our torsion bar. I haven't reattached our wire yet, but that's coming. And now I'm going to the top. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten up those 3 nuts up here. Obviously, you're going to want to look up those torque settings and use a torque wrench to tighten them to the appropriate factory setting. So as usual, do as I say, not as I do. Alright, we'll put this wire back in place. Just check my brake on, make sure we didn't do any damage. It should be good. Alright, that side's done. Alright, time for side number 2. I'm going to go ahead and just speed this one up as we run through it so you can kind of watch it again. But the other side, that should have been enough to show you every step. Now we're just going to do this one real quick. Real quick for you to watch, not real quick for me to do. Alright, so I stopped for a second because I want to show you this. My wife was actually out here earlier. She's like, were they bad? Can you tell if they're bad? And I said, baby, sometimes you just can't tell. But this one, if we take a close look, we can definitely tell. Notice the wetness. It's very oily. And I guess you can't see in there, but I see oil leakage there. That oil came from inside of the charge cartridge. This is all wet with oil. And I'll move it over here, maybe you can see a little better. A little bit dark already, but I think you can kind of see the glossiness there. So, there. That's what it looks like when it's bad. In fact, the entire strut assembly looks oily and dirty from picking up dust as it was leaking. Alright guys, so there we go. Replacement of 2 strut assemblies. I'm not going to say it's easy. I'm going to be feeling it in the morning. I still have the rear shocks to do. That'll be probably the next video. I haven't put everything back on this yet because there's some funk up here, some dirt and everything. I'm going to go ahead and pressure wash off and let the car dry. I am going to cover some of the electronics while I do that so that nothing gets damaged, but I'm going to clean it up a little bit, let it sit overnight. Might do the rear shocks tomorrow and hook up that video, but I already took it for a test drive and a big time improvement in the ride. The select track alarm went off, so I'm a little worried about that. I'm hoping that the computer just has to get used to the new ride. I'm going to go and look that up and see what it means, but it says that service the traction control. Didn't have that before. There were no electronics that were hooked up or unhooked, so I'm just assuming that the car realizes that there's a difference in the ride, which there definitely is. So hopefully it will adjust and that error will go away. If not, look for a video on that. Okay, so if you watched it this far, I really appreciate it. Please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Hope you found it useful. I'll see you next time. Thanks.